me a few hard words there, Ronnie. I always find it. He gets them pretty good, though. I gotta admit, he's getting them down. Appreciate everybody hanging out for the devotional this afternoon. Just a real quick kind of lesson from a guy I'm kind of partial to. I've always liked Amos as a prophet, not because he was the most lengthy or the most complex, but because he was a southern boy. I know southern Judah, but still, he was a southern boy, and I always liked the southern boys. He was also a farmer rancher. Okay, he did not go to any preaching school. He was not a professional orator, but God caught him in the field and said, you need to go give a message to my people Israel in the northern 10 tribes. And so I've often really liked the way Amos handled stuff and the way he spoke. He is very plain spoken. There's some controversy and conflict over some of his prophecies, but I don't think there should be. But nevertheless, he was pretty plain spoken. But one of the things that is striking to me is the timing of his message. Because when you look at where Israel was during the course of King Jeroboam II's reign, Israel was doing very well financially. They were getting along with a lot of the countries around, so their GDP was up. They had lots of back and forth with other nations. Things were going well. And there's so many similarities I see between Amos and where we are this day and age. And the need we have for more individuals to step up and preach the truth in an environment that's not too ready to receive it. As a matter of fact, when you start in verse 10, you will see right off the bat that what Amos had to say was not popular. The priest of Bethel, this Amaziah fella, didn't like what was being stated. In fact, his line to the king was that Amos has conspired against you. I don't know when the last time you're telling the truth was viewed as a conspiracy, but I'll tell you for a fact, we live in a culture that really does not accept the truth of things very well. When we have members of Congress who are struggling to define what a woman is, you know where our culture is going at this day and age, and it's a struggle just to stand up and tell people a truth about something so simply biological and scientific. You know we got to be in struggles theologically, and you know our culture is such and our country is such right now that we are moving the pendulum back a little bit toward the quote-unquote conservative side of things, but don't let that fool you. We still have an in-depth problem with people believing, number one, there is a God, and that this should be a nation under God, and that we ought to go to God for rules about how we conduct ourselves socially. I pray constantly, I know many of you do also, for our country's leaders, that they will go back to God and His standards in order to make laws and have effective impact on the civil attitude of people in this country. Until we do, we're going to be a lost cause. Righteousness exalts a nation, and that is not where we are today. So Amos was in a similar circumstance as we are, and so therefore this guy goes to Amos, actually goes to the king and said, Amos has said this kind of stuff. Jeroboam's going to die. Israel's going to be led away, and the land can't handle it. I like that phrase there in the 10th verse. The land is not able to bear all of his words. What is interesting in Amos's response is the way he comes across so gentle, genteel, nice, kind, with pretty words. Okay, no, he doesn't do that. He's warned, though, at this point in time, in verse 12, get out of here, we don't want to hear it. Now, I can't speak for you, but it is very often the case that when we talk to our friends about religious notions, they can be a little less than energetic or receptive to those kinds of conversations, but it's rare, and unless you can tell me otherwise, it's rare that somebody says, shut your mouth, I don't want to hear it. But by the way, it is also noteworthy that this Amaziah was a priest at Bethel. Now, I'm just going on what that scenario was. He wasn't a priest according to God, okay? And so what he would relate to, or what he would match up with in our common culture, would be those in alternate religion other than the religion that Christ established. And that's who you're looking at, people that don't want to hear what you've got to say because it conflicts with what they would like you to believe. And so he was struggling with it. He was being told, shut it up, don't talk about it anymore. As a matter of fact, he was told, go to your own country, go back to Judah, and you eat and prophesy there. This is another interesting thing about Amos. He was not a homeboy. This was not his hometown he was speaking in. You know, Jesus made the comment, prophets not without honor except his own country. Well, that stands true. But, you know, prophets didn't have a lot of honor in somebody else's country either if they were teaching the truth. But the key, of course, is that Amos was teaching the truth. And what I really enjoy reading, because I admire this man's courage, and that's what it comes down to. You're in a foreign country. They're rich and doing well. They're comfortable where they are. They don't want to hear a negative, quote-unquote, message that's going to condemn them for how things are going because they're happy with where they are. And let me tell you for a fact, there is no better way to make yourself unpopular than to tell someone this is not right when they want to do it and they're happy about doing it. You can immediately become an enemy by telling them that. Notice his response. He starts out with the fact that here you are, a priest in Bethel, very likely groomed for the position, taught the position, and so forth. Amos says, I was no prophet. That's not the way I started. I wasn't even the son of a prophet, for those of us that are preacher's kids. You know what I mean? That's not what his history was. He was a farmer rancher. He was far removed from the oration of God's word to people who are doing things they should be doing. I'm not that kind of thing. I'm a sheep breeder, tender of sycamore trees. He said, but the Lord took me as I followed the flock, and the Lord said to me, go prophesy to my people Israel. Now, how do you deny your responsibility to God and still remain faithful if you don't do what God tells you to do? Now, this is back in a day when they tell us when God was speaking to people directly. And he spoke directly to Amos and said, go prophesy. Today, we have been given similar instruction, not directly, but through God's word, that tells us, you be a light. Talked about that this morning a bit. You're a light in the community. A light's not put under a bushel. You set it on a hill. Everybody sees it. They look to you for an example. Number one. Number two, you're to teach people. Go on to all the world, preach the gospel to every creature. The way Matthew puts it is you teach them, you baptize them, and then you teach them some more. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That was not a directive to preachers. That was a directive to members. We're all supposed to be active in being an example and teaching people, and that's what we've got in Amos. He's got no formal education in preaching. He just decided, I'm going to do what God said, and I'm going to go preach. And so therefore, that's what he did. And then the next thing that is interesting is in verse 16, which is very critical when and this is a weakness I have, I work on it all the time, I hope you will too, but we've got to listen to people when we're talking to them about God's word. And I know what I want to say, and I know really quickly an answer for somebody that says something, and I have it usually before they get their argument out, and I need to throttle myself and stifle myself because we need to listen to what people say. And that's what he says. Now, therefore, hear the word of the Lord. You say, Amos heard what they said. Amos understood what they said. And as the Lord directed him, he says, here is what you're telling me. Now, one of the lessons I learned a long time ago in communication is that communication is not a singular thing. It's a two-way street. As a matter of fact, there's a formula that they use where you speak, somebody speaks back what you spoke so that you think, okay, yeah, they got it, or no, they don't, and you speak back. And after the circular motion of speeches, after a while, you've both finally come to a shared meaning of what the thought is you're trying to convey. I understand what I'm saying to you, and you understand what I'm saying to you, and you're telling me you understand it. Okay? What he is doing here is saying, here's what you said, and so I got to say this so that we got it right between us. When we work with people, we need to learn to listen, and it is a learned skill. It's not something that comes natural, because most of the time, and I find myself guilty of this, when somebody begins to respond to me, I'm not listening to them. They've said two words that I disagree with, and I'm already formulating the argument against what they just said. And that's the wrong way to go about communicating with people. Listen to what they said and where they're coming from. And then once you get it, the safety valve here is repeat back to them what they said and said, is that what you're saying? Because very often I have found in my short tenure of being patient, very often you will find that when you repeat back what they said, they're going, yeah, that's what I said, but that's not what I meant. Because very often people, not being superb spokesmen and orators, don't say the right words or form the words around the thought they're trying to convey. Give people an opportunity in your listening to them to understand that you understand what they're saying. And that's what Amos does. You say, do not prophesy against Israel, do not spout against the house of Isaac. Well, that's a little biased the way it's put, but he's very accurate in what they are doing. Get out of the country, go prophesy in your own place, you're not welcome here. He really did put it kind of mild when you get down to it. But we need to listen to what people say. Amos was a listener. He wasn't an orator, skilled so deeply in theological jargon that he was ready before he finished listening to him to spew out some truth that they just obviously didn't know, or they wouldn't be talking like they're talking. It's a very hard thing to do. It's a command of patience, and that's my weak spot, but I'm working on it. And then, of course, finally in verse 17. And this is where the rubber meets the road. You know, I really like my elders' attitude about the concept of negative sermon. There's really no such thing as a negative sermon if it's the truth. If it's the truth, it's not negative, it's positive. It may not be something I want to hear. It may not be easy to hear. And it certainly, more than likely, will not be easy to apply. Because, yeah, I can hear what you're saying, and yeah, I think I understand it, but wow, how am I going to do that? That's where I go with my process. But it's understanding that here is the truth of the matter. You need to hear it. And sometimes the truth is not pleasant to hear. And I understand that most people will commit to the idea that, oh, I love the truth, I want the truth. I'm always cautious with those kind of people that have to verbalize that, because most of the time they're telling you, when they say, oh, I love the truth, I want the truth, they really don't. They want you to be aware of the fact that when you tell me the truth, I may not like you anymore. And that happens way too often. It didn't stop Amos whatsoever. There was no slowdown in his message. Now, if you want to make friends real quick, tell somebody your wife is going to be a harlot in the city. That was probably what some of the audience thought was a bit of a rough start. But it got worse. Your sons and daughters will fall out. Sons and daughters are going to be killed. Your land's going to be divided up, separated out amongst the victors of this battle. And you're going to die in a defiled land. You're not even going to be here when you die. They're going to drag you off after turning your wife into a hooker and killing your kids. They're going to drag you off some other place, and they're going to kill you there. Now, you can't tell me that that didn't get some people's attention there in Israel and the northern kingdoms that were living in a world of idolatry, in a world of wealth and prosperity, and we're comfortable. And of all the things to tell somebody that is comfortable, this had to go over like a lead balloon. But it's the truth. And Amos had the backbone to teach the truth. Now, what we find here is an audience that is not willing to hear it, and this goes on later on, and it's going to get even uglier. But nevertheless, he said Israel's going to be led away captive from his own land. Now, for those of you who know Israel's history, you know the fact that this all came true. When the Assyrians came down on the northern kingdom disappeared. It got segregated, separated, and scattered all over the earth. They were done. Okay? None of whom, at that time when Amos is preaching here in the Jeroboam II's reign, there was no even thought of something like that happening. Everything seemed to be peachy. Everything was rosy. It's going good. In this country, it really is going better than what it used to be. I'm hearing a lot of people very encouraged by the government we have, by the swing of national decisions that are being made, particularly even in our own state, Texas, how things are going better, and all of a sudden the economy looks a little bit better because of some of the things that our president's doing, and so forth and so on it goes. But frankly, let me tell you what, life cycles, And we shouldn't base our comfort zone on what's going on in this world. Our comfort zone ought to be one like Amos's, who is willing because God tells us to do something, to do what he tells us, even when the message is not going to be received well. And most of our culture will not receive it well. Many discussions I've had in the last few weeks about the way of the church, where we're going. The dearth of young people, they're just almost absent from our assemblies almost anymore. The Summer Youth Series is a great example, which is a really neat thing, but they're very rarely geared toward precisely the young people, because there are more older people there than there are young people. That's just an observation that's there. And it's not that it's a bad thing that there are lots of old people there to listen to a good gospel sermon, but where's our kids? Well, they're disappearing in every realm that you can think of. And of course, too, I guess that's where people start pointing fingers. Well, who's to blame? Well, you know, we can all theorize where it came from, but frankly, it's a cycle. And that's where we are right now. It's not good. And while there are many things going well, there are a lot of people out there that don't want to hear the truth. But that's where we need to be, the Amos of this culture. We need to be willing to say uncomfortable things to people because it's truth. Not because we want to get over on them, not because we want to put them down or judge them, but, you know, tell them they're all wrong. That's unnecessary. What's necessary is the truth. And in order to do that, we have to have a commitment regardless of our excuses about not being qualified. As a matter of fact, his statement there in verse 14, it didn't come quite that close, but it almost comes close to the old Moses standing in front of the burning bush saying, oh, I'm not qualified. I haven't got the tongue for it. And God smartly just went back at him and said, who made your tongue? You can do what I tell you to do. We're there. We can be Amoses in this culture. We can tell people the uncomfortable things. We can tell them in love and kindness, even if it's this morning expecting rejection, okay, fine, but they need to be told. Amos obeyed God, going to a place he was not welcome, with a message that was not welcome, and a threat on his life that was a real thing. Get out of our country. Don't be prophesying here. By the way, in that couple of chapters, Amos didn't quit. We need more Amoses in our culture. Guys who stand up with courage and teach the truth. And where that happens, since we're all just, farmers, ranchers, southern folk, where that happens is not in the great big auditoriums. It happens with our neighbors every day when we talk to them. It happens with our friends at events we attend together. It happens in the grocery store or in the hardware store, or even if you happen to go to Tractor Supply, it happens there. It happens in places where we talk to people about their soul's destination. We need more Amoses in our culture today. We always offer an invitation in song, and it stands today in the same regard. We want you to get your life right. Whatever you need to do, if you need to respond in some way, do so as we stand together.